Hashtag the reset. The rain hammered Ethan Hayes' windshield like 1,000 tiny fists as he navigated the wet streets of San Francisco's Mission District. At 38, he'd once been the golden boy of EtherTech, a rising product director with a corner office and a sweeping view of the Bay. Now he drove a beat-up 2012 Civic home to a cramped studio apartment above a laundromat, the ghost of his failures hanging heavier than the coastal fog. 10 years. 10 years since he'd traded everything for a shot at the top. 10 years since he'd thrown Clara Bennett, his mentor and the woman who'd taught him everything he knew about ethical product design, under the bus to sell his own rushed, cost-cutting smart home platform to the board. He'd called her sustainable, user-first design, too slow, too expensive, too out of touch with the market. His aggressive plan had won him the promotion. It had also crashed and burned 6 months later, felled by catastrophic privacy breaches and faulty hardware that cost the company $42 million in recalls and lawsuits. He'd been fired, blacklisted across Silicon Valley, his reputation in tatters. Worse than the career collapse was the family he'd lost along the way. He'd missed Lila's first trimester ultrasounds for back-to-back launch meetings. He'd been on a business trip in New York when Sophie was born, walking into the hospital 12 hours too late to hold his newborn daughter first. He'd skipped his dad's 65th birthday to pitch a feature that never launched, and 6 months later, when the call came that his dad had suffered a massive stroke, he'd been stuck in a boardroom arguing about quarterly targets. By the time he drove to Sacramento, it was over. Lila had left 2 years later, Sophie's tiny hand in hers, a single suitcase by the door. "You're never here," she'd said, quiet and exhausted, no anger left in her voice. "Even when you're physically in the room, you're still at work." He hadn't argued. He'd known she was right. Now, on this rain-soaked October night, he stared at the crumpled Polaroid on his passenger seat. 28-year-old him, Lila glowing beside him, pregnant with Sophie, taken the week before that fateful board meeting. If he'd known then what he knew now, a flash of oncoming headlights blinded him. A delivery van hydroplaned through the red light, horn blaring. Ethan swerved hard, his tires screaming on the wet asphalt. The Civic slammed into the concrete guardrail with a deafening crunch. Glass shattered. The world went black. The first thing Ethan heard was the sharp, familiar beep of an office laser printer. He jolted awake, his head throbbing, expecting to find himself in a hospital ER. Instead, he stared at a faded cubicle wall covered in neon sticky notes, a half-empty cup of cold drip coffee on the desk in front of him. On his monitor, a presentation glowed. Ether Smart Home V2 Board Proposal, dated October 17, 2014. 2014. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. The lock screen confirmed it. Friday, October 17, 2014. 10 years to the day before the crash. 10 years before he destroyed everything good in his life. He was 28 again, back in his first product manager role at EtherTech. The make-or-break board meeting was Monday. Lila was 12 weeks pregnant with Sophie. His dad was still alive, healthy and stubborn, fixing up his old 1978 Ford F-150 in the garage of a Sacramento home. This wasn't a dream. It was a second chance. For a long minute, he just sat there, heart hammering against his ribs, letting the weight of it sink in. All the mistakes, all the regrets, all the what-ifs that had haunted him for a decade. He could fix them. He could do it right this time. First, the board meeting. The original plan he and his ambitious coworker Jared had spent weeks drafting was a disaster waiting to happen. Cut corners on end-to-end encryption to hit a lower price point. Rush launch by 3 months to beat a competitor. Ignore Clara's warnings about long-term user trust. It had won them the promotion back then. It had also ruined everything. Clara's plan, the one he'd mocked as naive and idealistic, focused on privacy-first design, reparable sustainable hardware, and slow, intentional growth. Back then, he thought it was a losing strategy. Now he knew it was the only idea that would have worked. In the timeline he'd come from, after Ether's public crash, Clara had left and founded her own company on those exact principles. It was now worth $2. $3 billion. Ethan pulled up Clara's buried proposal, the one he'd hidden in a folder labeled low priority, and started reading. By the time he left the office that night, he had a new plan. He wasn't going to fight Clara for the promotion. He was going to stand with her. Monday's boardroom was tense, the air thick with the pressure of a make-or-break product launch. Jared went first, presenting their original cost-cutting plan with polished confidence. The board nodded along, impressed by the low price point and aggressive launch timeline. When he finished, he glanced at Ethan, expectant. This was where they'd tag team to shoot down Clara's idea, just like they practiced. Clara stood next, calm and steady, walking through her sustainable, privacy-focused design. The room grew quiet, skeptical. When she finished, the CEO turned to Ethan. Your team drafted the competing proposal. What do you think of Clara's approach? All eyes were on him. This was the moment. 10 years ago, he'd torn her plan apart, listing every flaw he could invent to make his own look better. Today, he took a deep breath. I think it's the only plan that won't sink this company long-term, he said. The room went dead silent. Jared stared at him, mouth slightly open, shocked and furious. Ethan leaned forward, pointing to the slide on the screen. Our plan cuts corners on encryption to save $12 per unit. In 2 years, when state privacy regulations tighten, and they will, we'll be facing millions in fines. Worse, we'll lose user trust permanently. Clara's design builds that trust in from day one. It costs a little more upfront, but it scales better. It lasts longer, and it's the right thing to do. He paused, then added the detail he knew would seal it. A detail no one in 2014 could have predicted, but one he'd learned the hard way from the original product's post-mortem report. Also, our proposed hardware has a thermal fault in the central hub. It's easy to miss in early stress testing, but it will cause overheating in 15% of units within 18 months. It's a fire hazard. Clara's design uses a different chipset that avoids that flaw entirely. The board murmured, exchanging surprised looks. The CEO turned to Clara, impressed. You found the thermal issue in your testing? Clara glanced at Ethan, confused but quick on her feet. We've been running extended stress tests for 3 months. It's one of the core reasons we pushed for the alternate hardware. After 20 minutes of heated debate, the board voted unanimously to greenlight Clara's proposal, with Ethan assigned as her lead product partner. After the meeting, Jared cornered him by the copy room, face red with rage. What the hell was that? We had this in the bag. You just threw away our promotion for some tree-hugger nonsense? Ethan met his gaze evenly. It's not nonsense. It's the right call. Short-term gains aren't worth long-term failure. You'll see. Jared stormed off, and Ethan knew he'd made an enemy. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was finally on the right path. That night, Ethan didn't stay late to catch up on work. He left the office at 6 p.m. sharp, stopping at Lila's favorite bakery on the way home to pick up a lemon scone and a small bouquet of daisies, her favorite. When he walked in the door, Lila looked up from her laptop, surprised. You're home early. I thought you'd be celebrating the board win late. We won, but not the way I thought we would. He set the flowers on the kitchen counter and knelt down in front of her, resting his hand gently on her still flat stomach. How's our girl doing today? Lila blinked. She told him that morning she had a silly feeling the baby was a girl. He'd brushed it off then, distracted by a last-minute meeting prep. Now he was looking at her like it was the most important thing in the world. She's fine, she said, smiling softly. Tired of me sitting at this desk all day, probably. Then let's go for a walk. He stood, offering her his hand. No work talk, just us, and the tiny human. They walked through Golden Gate Park as the sun set over the Pacific, talking about nothing and everything. For the first time since he'd started at Ether, Ethan didn't check his phone once. He just listened to Lila laugh, felt her hand in his, and let himself believe that this time he could get it right. That weekend, he drove up to Sacramento to see his dad. Tom Hayes was in the garage, covered in grease, twisting a wrench on his old pickup when Ethan pulled up. Hey, kiddo, his dad said, surprised, wiping his hands on a stained work rag. Didn't call ahead. Thought you were swamped with that big work project. Made time. Ethan grabbed a wrench off the workbench. Need a hand with the carburetor? They spent the whole day working on the truck, drinking bad diner coffee, and talking. Ethan listened as his dad told stories about his own first job at a machine shop, about when Ethan was 7 and tried to fix his bike and broke the chain. Before he left, he gave his dad a first-generation smartwatch, one that had just hit the market. For when you're out working on the truck and can't find your phone, he said. It has fall detection. And you can call me anytime with one button. Promise me you'll wear it." His dad rolled his eyes, but he slipped it on his wrist immediately. All right. You worry too much. But thanks, kid." Ethan hugged him tight before he left. In his old life, this had been the last birthday he'd missed. This time, he wasn't going to miss any of it. The months that followed were busy, but different this time. Ethan worked hard, but he didn't work late. He and Clara built the smart home platform together, leaning into her design philosophy and his knowledge of what pitfalls to avoid. They caught the thermal fault before it went to manufacturing. They built encryption stronger than the law required. They took an extra 3 months to test properly instead of rushing launch. The biggest hurdle came 3 months before launch, when their primary chip supplier announced a 6-month production delay. The board pressured them to switch to a cheaper, unvetted manufacturer to hit the original launch date. The exact same mistake Ethan had made in his first life, the one that had caused the catastrophic overheating faults. He and Clara fought the board for 2 weeks. Ethan presented granular data on the cheaper chips' failure rates, data he'd memorized from the original product's damning postmortem report. Clara laid out a revised timeline that pushed launch back 3 months, paired with a targeted marketing campaign to frame the delay as a commitment to quality over speed. It was a massive risk, but in the end, the board caved. They switched to a more reliable secondary supplier, accepted the delay, and launched their "We Wait for Perfect" campaign, which went viral on social media for its rare honesty. When the product finally hit shelves, the delay had only built hype. It sold out in 48 hours. Jared, still bitter about the board meeting, tried to sabotage them twice. Once by altering user test data to make their design look unpopular, once by leaking a draft of the privacy policy to a tech blog out of context. Both times, Ethan saw it coming. He'd been Jared once, hungry and reckless, willing to do anything to get ahead. He caught the data discrepancies before they reached the board, and he issued a calm, transparent response to the blog post that earned them widespread praise for their accountability. He never called Jared out publicly. He just pulled him aside after the second incident, quiet and firm. "I get it. I was exactly where you are. But this path, it doesn't end well. You burn bridges. You lose people. You win the promotion and lose everything that matters. It's not worth it." Jared didn't say anything, but he stopped sabotaging them after that. A few months later, he transferred to a different department. When Sophie was 3, she came down with a brutal case of pneumonia that landed her in the hospital for 3 days. Back in his old life, Ethan would have sent Lila alone, logging into meetings from the hospital waiting room, checking emails while his daughter cried in pain. This time, he canceled his entire schedule, including a critical meeting with a major investor, and didn't leave the hospital once. He sat by Sophie's bed, reading her favorite picture books over and over, making silly faces to make her laugh when she felt terrible. He brought Lila blankets and hot coffee, held her hand when the doctor came in to talk about treatment. On the 3rd day, when Sophie's fever broke and she asked for pancakes, Ethan ran out and got her a stack of chocolate chip pancakes, extra syrup. The investor, a man named David who'd raised 3 kids of his own, didn't get mad when Ethan rescheduled. "Anyone who puts their sick kid first is someone I want to do business with," he said when they finally met. "Shows you've got your priorities straight." The deal closed a month later. At the company all hands that winter, the CEO called Ethan and Clara on stage. He handed Clara the promotion to VP of Engineering, the role Ethan had once craved more than anything. Then he turned to Ethan. And for Ethan, who had the humility to back a better idea and the foresight to steer us away from disaster, we're creating a new role, Senior Director of Product Strategy, with a mandate to build a team that puts people first. And one more thing. He smiled. Company-wide flexible work policy, fully remote optional, for every parent and caregiver on your team. You mentioned it was important. We agree. The room cheered. Ethan looked out at the crowd, and for a second he saw his old self, the guy who would have done anything for that title. Now, the best part of the promotion wasn't the corner office or the raise. It was the chance to make sure no one else had to choose between their job and their family. That night, he went home to Lila and 6-month-old Sophie. He picked up his daughter, her tiny hand wrapping around his finger, and held her close. Lila leaned against him, and they watched the bay lights flicker outside the window. This was success, not a title, not a salary. 10 years passed. On October 17th, 2024, Ethan Hayes stood on the back porch of his family's home in Mill Valley, watching the sunset over the San Francisco Bay. At 38, he was now Chief Product Officer at EtherTech. Clara was CEO. Together, they'd built the company into a global leader in ethical tech, known as much for its family-friendly policies and sustainable manufacturing as its innovative products. Jared had left Ether 5 years earlier to launch his own startup, focused on affordable smart home devices for low-income families. They'd had coffee just last month. He'd thanked Ethan, quiet and genuine, for talking him off the reckless path all those years ago. They were partners now, not enemies. Behind Ethan, the backyard hummed with warm, ordinary life. Sophie, now 10 years old with Lila's smile and his own stubborn curiosity, chased their golden retriever around the raised vegetable garden. Lila, now a successful children's book author, set out ceramic plates on the patio table for dinner. Tom, 72 and still stubborn as ever, knelt in the dirt, tending to his heirloom tomato plants. He'd moved up to Mill Valley 6 years prior, after a mild fall in his garage. The smartwatch Ethan had given him had called 911 automatically, and Ethan had gotten there in time. No missed goodbyes this time. "Dinner's ready," Lila called, grinning as she set down a bowl of fresh salad. Sophie came sprinting over, the dog hot on her heels. Ethan laughed, catching his daughter mid-run and swinging her up into his arms. She squealed, wrapping her arms tight around his neck. Tom stood, brushing dirt off his jeans, and joined them at the table. They sat there as the sky turned soft pink and deep purple, eating grilled salmon and fresh tomatoes, talking about Sophie's soccer game and Lila's new book and the road trip they were planning to Lake Tahoe for Christmas. No work emails, no urgent calls, just them. After dinner, Ethan stepped back out onto the porch for a minute alone. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through old photos. The day Sophie was born, his dad teaching her to fish in the creek behind the house, him and Clara at the company's 15th anniversary party. He thought about that rainy night in the Mission, about the crash, about the empty, lonely life he'd left behind. The old him would have thought this second chance was all about the career, about winning, about getting it right, about proving he was good enough. But he knew better now. The second chance wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present. It was about choosing people over promotions, trust over speed, family over the next big thing. It was about saying, "I'm wrong," when you messed up, and lifting people up instead of climbing over them to get ahead. It was about the small, ordinary moments, dinner on the patio, bedtime stories, a Saturday spent fixing an old truck that added up to a life well lived. Hey, Lila's
3 months after moving to the Ohio suburbs, I finally grasped the essence of the American middle-class neighborhood, serene on the surface, yet rife with underlying drama. It all began on a whim when I decided to raise 3 egg-laying hens in my backyard. The story starts on a Saturday in April. While browsing a local garage sale for second-hand furniture, I struck up a conversation with Hank, a retired farmer. He spent half an hour regaling me with tales of his chicken's glory days before insisting I take 3 6-month-old hens off his hands, declaring it's a waste of a backyard lawn for a young person in the suburbs not to keep chickens. Acting on impulse, I brought the hens home, naming them Waffle, Pancake, and Fries, and built a simple coop in the corner of the yard. Collecting 2 warm eggs after get-off work every day made my breakfasts taste so much better. I thought this marked the start of an idyllic pastoral life until a week later, I found an anonymous, neatly typed warning letter in my mailbox. It stated that I was violating the Homeowners Association (HOA) rules by keeping poultry livestock and ordered me to get rid of them within 7 days or face a fine. I was dumbfounded. I had consulted the homeowner's handbook when I moved in, and while it explicitly banned cattle and pigs, there was no mention of chickens. After scouring the thick manual for half an hour, I finally found a line in the fine print on page 37. The keeping of any farm animals with economic utility is prohibited. Hoping that 3 egg-laying hens wouldn't cause much of a stir, I did nothing only to arrive home the next afternoon and find Margaret, the HOA president, standing outside my fence. Dressed in a crisp floral dress and white gloves, She was holding a tablet and snapping photos of my backyard. When she saw me return, she adjusted her glasses and spoke in a tone as stern as if she were interrogating a criminal. "Young man, I've received complaints from neighbors. The chickens in your backyard are ruining the neighborhood's aesthetics and peace. I am formally notifying you that you must remove them within 3 days. Otherwise, we will initiate fine proceedings, $100 a day." I tried to explain that the 3 chickens were quiet, they never made a sound, and that the eggs were for my own consumption rather than commercial use. But Margaret wouldn't hear a word of it. She turned on her heels in her low heels and walked away, tossing a final remark over her shoulder: "Rules are rules. The neighborhood's appearance is more important than those few eggs of yours." Over the next few days, I witnessed firsthand the formidable tenacity of an American neighborhood busybody. Margaret didn't just patrol my backyard and take photos at the same time every day. She went door to door lobbying neighbors to join in a formal complaint against me. She even printed out photos of my chicken coop and posted them on the community bulletin board with the caption, "Beware of unauthorized livestock. Protect our neighborhood." I had initially considered just giving the chickens back to Hank, but then the situation took an unexpected turn. Daisy, the black woman who lived next door, knocked on my door carrying a plate of freshly baked cookies. She smiled as she entered. "Don't pay any attention to Margaret's nonsense, young man. She just has too much time on her hands." Last year, she complained that the sunflowers in my garden were too tall and blocked her view of the street. Daisy told me the whole neighborhood was fed up with Margaret's rigid policing. She had dictated that grass couldn't be taller than 2 inches, banned lawnmowers before 10 a.m. on Sundays, and even insisted that Christmas lights on porches be warm white rather than multicolored. "Her targeting your chickens is the perfect opportunity. We need to teach her a lesson," Daisy said, her eyes sparkling as she suggested a plan. "I should look up the county's agricultural regulations." Many counties in Ohio permitted residents to keep a small number of laying hens for personal use, and HOA rules couldn't conflict with county law. Early the next morning, I rushed to the county agricultural department's website and found the relevant regulations. Households in residential areas are permitted to keep up to 4 laying hens without a license, provided the coop is located at least 10 feet away from neighbors' homes. I measured the distance of my coop from Margaret's house. It was a full 20 feet away, putting me well within the rules. Armed with a printout of the regulations, I went to see Margaret. I expected her to back down, but she merely glanced at the document and sneered. "County rules are one thing, but our HOA has its own bylaws. You signed the purchase contract, so you have to abide by them. If you don't like it, we'll see you in court." I had assumed she was just making empty threats, but a week later, I actually received a court summons. The HOA was officially suing me for keeping poultry in violation of the rules, demanding the immediate removal of the chickens and payment of $1,200 in accumulated fines. I was overwhelmed. The idea of going to court over 3 chickens seemed absurd, but Daisy was even more fired up. She thumped her chest and said, "Don't be afraid. Let's fight her on this. I'll find witnesses for you. Plenty of people in the neighborhood are willing to help." Over the next 2 weeks, my house turned into a neighborhood hub. Old George, a retired lawyer, volunteered to provide free legal advice, noting that cases involving HOA overreach often have a high success rate. Tom, a carpenter from down the street, reinforced and renovated the coop while taking photos from various angles to serve as evidence. Even Mrs. Miller, an elderly woman living alone who rarely ventured out, came by to offer her testimony, saying that hearing the chickens cluck every day lifted her spirits and certainly didn't constitute a noise nuisance. Even more amusingly, someone posted about the situation in the community Facebook group, and it instantly went viral. People from neighboring towns flocked to the comments to show their support, with some even proposing a hen solidarity squad to stage a protest with signs outside the courthouse on the day of the hearing. Margaret wasn't idle either. She rounded up 3 so-called aggrieved neighbors to testify. One claimed the smell of the chickens was so bad he didn't dare open his windows. Another said the birds attracted rats, and a third, even more absurdly, claimed his son had nightmares after seeing them. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. Nearly 30 people squeezed into the small county civil court, most of them neighbors there to support me. The judge, an elderly man with graying hair, listened to both sides and first asked Margaret, plaintiff, "You claim the defendant's chickens produce an offensive odor. Did you go to the site to smell it yourself? Is there a specific inspection report?" Margaret was taken aback and replied that there was no need to smell it. Raising chickens inevitably produces an odor. The judge then turned to the neighbor's child, who had allegedly suffered nightmares. "Young man, what color were the chickens you saw?" The child hemmed and hawed for a long time before admitting he hadn't seen them clearly. He just thought they were scary. When it was our turn, Old George first produced the county agricultural regulations and showed photos detailing the coop's dimensions and placement. He then called Mrs. Miller to testify and finally produced 3 eggs, cracking them open right there in court to demonstrate that they were clean, healthy, and posed absolutely no hygiene issues. The entire proceeding felt like a comedy. The neighbors in the gallery struggled to suppress their laughter, and the judge himself had to stifle a smile several times while maintaining order. When it came time for the verdict, the judge cleared his throat and announced, "The court finds that Ohio state and local regulations take precedence over the HOA's internal bylaws. The defendant's keeping of 3 egg-laying hens fully complies with county ordinances. The coop is properly situated and has caused no substantial impact on neighbors. The HA's claim regarding commercial use is invalid. Eggs produced for household consumption do not constitute a commercial enterprise. Therefore, all claims by the plaintiff are dismissed. The defendant is not required to remove the chickens or pay any fines." 3 months after moving to the Ohio suburbs, I finally grasped the essence of the American middle-class neighborhood, serene on the surface, yet rife with underlying drama. It all began on a whim when I decided to raise 3 egg-laying hens in my backyard. The story starts on a Saturday in April. While browsing a local garage sale for second-hand furniture, I struck up a conversation with Hank, a retired farmer. He spent half an hour regaling me with tales of his chicken's glory days before insisting I take 3 6-month-old hens off his hands, declaring, "It's a waste of a backyard lawn for a young person in the suburbs not to keep chickens." Acting on impulse, I brought the hens home, naming them Waffle, Pancake, and Fries, and built a simple coop in the corner of the yard. Collecting 2 warm eggs after get-off work every day made my breakfasts taste so much better. I thought this marked the start of an idyllic pastoral life until a week later, I found an anonymous, neatly typed warning letter in my mailbox. It stated that I was violating the Homeowners Association (HOA) rules by keeping poultry livestock and ordered me to get rid of them within 7 days or face a fine. I was dumbfounded. I had consulted the homeowner's handbook when I moved in, and while it explicitly banned cattle and pigs, there was no mention of chickens. After scouring the thick manual for half an hour, I finally found a line in the fine print on page 37. The keeping of any farm animals with economic utility is prohibited. Hoping that 3 egg-laying hens wouldn't cause much of a stir, I did nothing only to arrive home the next afternoon and find Margaret, the HOA president, standing outside my fence. Dressed in a crisp floral dress and white gloves, she was holding a tablet and snapping photos of my backyard. When she saw me return, she adjusted her glasses and spoke in a tone as stern as if she were interrogating a criminal. "Young man, I've received complaints from neighbors. The chickens in your backyard are ruining the neighborhood's aesthetics and peace. I am formally notifying you that you must remove them within 3 days. Otherwise, we will initiate fine proceedings, $100 a day." I tried to explain that the 3 chickens were quiet, They never made a sound, and that the eggs were for my own consumption rather than commercial use. But Margaret wouldn't hear a word of it. She turned on her heels in her low heels and walked away, tossing a final remark over her shoulder: "Rules are rules. The neighborhood's appearance is more important than those few eggs of yours." Over the next few days, I witnessed firsthand the formidable tenacity of an American neighborhood busybody. Margaret didn't just patrol my backyard and take photos at the same time every day. She went door to door lobbying neighbors to join in a formal complaint against me. She even printed out photos of my chicken coop and posted them on the community bulletin board with the caption, "Beware of unauthorized livestock. Protect our neighborhood." I had initially considered just giving the chickens back to Hank, but then the situation took an unexpected turn. Daisy, the black woman who lived next door, knocked on my door carrying a plate of freshly baked cookies. She smiled as she entered. "Don't pay any attention to Margaret's nonsense, young man. She just has too much time on her hands." Last year, she complained that the sunflowers in my garden were too tall and blocked her view of the street. Daisy told me the whole neighborhood was fed up with Margaret's rigid policing. She had dictated that grass couldn't be taller than 2 inches, banned lawnmowers before 10 a.m. on Sundays, and even insisted that Christmas lights on porches be warm white rather than multicolored. "Her targeting your chickens is the perfect opportunity. We need to teach her a lesson," Daisy said, her eyes sparkling as she suggested a plan. "I should look up the county's agricultural regulations." Many counties in Ohio permitted residents to keep a small number of laying hens for personal use, and HOA rules couldn't conflict with county law. Early the next morning, I rushed to the county agricultural department's website and found the relevant regulations. Households in residential areas are permitted to keep up to 4 laying hens without a license, provided the coop is located at least 10 feet away from neighbors' homes. I measured the distance of my coop from Margaret's house. It was a full 20 feet away, putting me well within the rules. Armed with a printout of the regulations, I went to see Margaret. I expected her to back down, but she merely glanced at the document and sneered. "County rules are one thing, but our HOA has its own bylaws. You signed the purchase contract, so you have to abide by them. If you don't like it, we'll see you in court." I had assumed she was just making empty threats, but a week later, I actually received a court summons. The HOA was officially suing me for keeping poultry in violation of the rules, demanding the immediate removal of the chickens and payment of $1,200 in accumulated fines. I was overwhelmed. The idea of going to court over 3 chickens seemed absurd, but Daisy was even more fired up. She thumped her chest and said, "Don't be afraid. Let's fight her on this. I'll find witnesses for you. Plenty of people in the neighborhood are willing to help." Over the next 2 weeks, my house turned into a neighborhood hub. Old George, a retired lawyer, volunteered to provide free legal advice, noting that cases involving HOA overreach often have a high success rate. Tom, a carpenter from down the street, reinforced and renovated the coop while taking photos from various angles to serve as evidence. Even Mrs. Miller, an elderly woman living alone who rarely ventured out, came by to offer her testimony, saying that hearing the chickens cluck every day lifted her spirits and certainly didn't constitute a noise nuisance. Even more amusingly, someone posted about the situation in the community Facebook group, and it instantly went viral. People from neighboring towns flocked to the comments to show their support, with some even proposing a hen solidarity squad to stage a protest with signs outside the courthouse on the day of the hearing. Margaret wasn't idle either. She rounded up 3 so-called aggrieved neighbors to testify. One claimed the smell of the chickens was so bad he didn't dare open his windows. Another said the birds attracted rats, and a third, even more absurdly, claimed his son had nightmares after seeing them. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. Nearly 30 people squeezed into the small county civil court, most of them neighbors there to support me. The judge, an elderly man with graying hair, listened to both sides and first asked Margaret, plaintiff, You claim the defendant's chickens produce an offensive odor. Did you go to the site to smell it yourself? Is there a specific inspection report? Margaret was taken aback and replied that there was no need to smell it. Raising chickens inevitably produces an odor. The judge then turned to the neighbor's child who had allegedly suffered nightmares. Young man, what color were the chickens you saw? The child hemmed and hawed for a long time before admitting he hadn't seen them clearly. He just thought they were scary. When it was our turn, Old George first produced the county agricultural regulations and showed photos detailing the coop's dimensions and placement. He then called Mrs. Miller to testify and finally produced 3 eggs, cracking them open right there in court to demonstrate that they were clean, healthy, and posed absolutely no hygiene issues. The entire proceeding felt like a comedy. The neighbors in the gallery struggled to suppress their laughter, and the judge himself had to stifle a smile several times while maintaining order. When it came time for the verdict, the judge cleared his throat and announced, "The court finds that Ohio state and local regulations take precedence over the HOA's internal bylaws. The defendant's keeping of 3 egg-laying hens fully complies with county ordinances. The coop is properly situated and has caused no substantial impact on neighbors." The HA's claim regarding commercial use is invalid. Eggs produced for household consumption do not constitute a commercial enterprise. Therefore, all claims by the plaintiff are dismissed. The defendant is not required to remove the chickens or pay any fines. 3 months after moving to a small town in Minnesota, I decided to host an American-style garage sale, partly to clear out the half-room's worth of clutter I'd brought with me, and partly to embrace the local culture. I had assumed it would be a simple affair, setting up a stall to offload old items at low prices, taking up a morning at most. Little did I know that this seemingly mundane small-town activity was governed by a complex set of unwritten rules, revealing just how elaborate and eccentric ordinary Americans could get over such a trivial matter. The very afternoon I finalized the plan, Linda, the neighbor across the street, knocked on my door with a plate of homemade cookies. Once seated, she immediately switched into seasoned mentor mode, walking me through the intricacies of garage sales in minute detail. The sale had to start promptly at 7 a.m. on Saturday, or savvy regulars would head elsewhere. Price tags shouldn't be set in stone, as Americans assume everything is negotiable and prices need to allow room for haggling, and photos of large furniture items had to be posted in the town's Facebook sales group beforehand to drum up interest, with a specific note saying no early birds, or else people might bang on your door at 5 a.m. to snatch up the best items. I listened with a degree of skepticism. After all, it was just selling some old stuff. Did it really need to be such a high-stakes affair? Yet, at 10 p.m. on Friday, while I was squatting in the garage attaching price tags, I heard a car drive slowly past. Its headlights deliberately swept across my garage. Linda sent a message warning me. That's one of the town's bargain hunters scouting the place. Don't leave the garage door open while you sleep tonight. Watch out for people sneaking in early to swipe the best items. The warning gave me the creeps. I hurriedly locked the garage door, feeling for the first time a sense of genuine awe and respect for this modest little sale. At 6:50 a.m. on Saturday, just as I rolled up the garage door, before I'd even finished arranging the last few stacks of books, 7 or 8 people were already standing at the entrance. Each carried a large cloth bag, their eyes fixed intently on the merchandise. The sheer intensity of the scene nearly gave me a start. At exactly 7 o'clock, the moment I said, "Let's start," a crowd surged in with astonishing speed. Before I could even react, a middle-aged man in a baseball cap had already scooped up the set of nearly new ceramic tableware I'd laid out. He didn't even ask the price. He just clutched the items tight before leisurely starting to haggle. Over the course of the morning, I encountered every sort of eccentric customer the town had to offer. There was a white-haired old lady who picked up a glass priced at 25 cents and haggled for a full 10 minutes. insisting I sell it to her for 10 cents because it has a tiny scratch and I'd have to pay to have it buffed out. Eventually, worn down by her persistence, I let her have it for 10 cents. As she walked away, perfectly satisfied, she casually pocketed 3 free fridge magnets I'd set out nearby. Then there was a bearded man who ignored the furniture and household goods, squatting instead in a corner to sift through the old CDs and cassette tapes I'd piled in a box. After digging for over half an hour, he picked out a dozen obscure country music tapes, claiming they were out-of-print collector's items he'd been hunting for years, and paid the full asking price without much fuss. Before leaving, he handed me his business card, saying that if I ever had more old tapes or records, I should look him up. He offered to come pick them up personally and pay a fairer price than anyone else. The most bizarre encounter, however, was with a middle-aged man in a suit who pulled up in a gleaming pickup truck. He stepped out and headed straight for my old treadmill. I had it priced at $80. He immediately offered $30. When I shook my head and refused, saying it was too low, he didn't get angry. Instead, he stood there chatting with me for 20 minutes about everything from Minnesota winters to his dog, eventually circling back to the treadmill. He claimed he didn't actually need it. He just saw that moving house was tough for a young person like me and wanted to help me get rid of the bulky item so I wouldn't have to pay someone else to haul it away. His relentless chatter left my head spinning, and I finally sold the treadmill to him for $40. He happily loaded it into his car, but before leaving he told me, "Young man, you're still too green. Next time you hold a yard sale, you've got to stand firm on the price of big-ticket items. Folks like us make a living by haggling our way into a bargain." I stood there with a wry smile. It turned out he'd taken the opportunity to teach me a lesson. By just past noon, the crowds had thinned out. As I was squatting on the ground sorting through the remaining items, Linda, a middle-aged woman from the neighborhood, walked over with a thermos and poured me a cup of hot coffee. She smiled and said I'd done a great job for my first day. She pointed to a house at the end of the street and told me the couple living there were the town's notorious resellers. Every weekend, they drove around to garage sales in a dozen nearby towns, snapping up items cheaply to flip online for a profit. The man who had just bought my tableware was part of their crew. Sure enough, the couple wandered over while she was speaking. They scanned my stall, picked up an old vintage lamp, and immediately offered $5, even though I'd marked it at $20. Just as I was about to refuse, Linda spoke up. Her tone was firm but polite. "I actually reserved that lamp with this young lady yesterday. My granddaughter needs it for her homework. You two should try looking elsewhere." The couple exchanged a glance, smiled, and walked away. Only after they left did Linda explain that these resellers were ruthless. They specifically targeted young people holding their first yard sales and drove prices down aggressively. They'd buy quality items for a few dollars and resell them for 10 or 20 times that amount. Longtime residents couldn't stand them and made a point of looking out for one another to ensure young people didn't get taken advantage of. I felt a warm glow in my heart. I had assumed the townspeople kept to themselves, but it turned out there was an unspoken bond of mutual support even in small matters like this. By mid-afternoon, most of the items at the stall had been sold. Only a few unwanted odds and ends remained. Just as I was debating whether to toss or donate the leftovers, a sudden bustle arose nearby. Residents from a few streets over had wrapped up their own yard sales and were wheeling their unsold goods toward my spot. Some brought stacks of old books, others carried baskets of kitchenware, and a few hauled over old chairs, figuring that since they'd just throw the stuff away anyway, they might as well pool it all here to see if anyone wanted it, or donate it to a charity shop if not. My previously quiet stall suddenly came alive. Passers-by, seeing the abundance of goods, stopped to browse. People chatted as they looked through the items, discussing which sales had the best finds, which local supermarket was having a discount, and whether we'd get heavy snow this winter. making it feel just like a neighborhood gathering. One mother, accompanied by her 2 children, picked out a pile of picture books and toys. The total came to $12, but she sheepishly explained she was a single mom on a tight budget and asked if the price could be lowered. A woman selling items nearby immediately spoke up. "Consider these books and toys a gift from me. Just take them. As long as the kids like them, that's what matters." The mother was stunned for a moment, then thanked her profusely, even leaving behind a bag of homemade cookies before she left. It wasn't until my 4th month living in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, that I really noticed the waist-high wooden box standing by the sidewalk in front of my house. Painted sky blue with a slanted rainproof roof and a little free library sticker on the door, it was one of those ubiquitous community book exchanges found all over the U.S. Anyone could drop off spare books or pick up something to read, relying entirely on the honor system with no registration or return deadlines required. At the time, I thought it was just a charming little touch and casually deposited a few novels I'd brought with me during the move. Little did I know that this wooden box, less than a cubic meter in volume, harbored a whole world of neighborhood unwritten rules, eccentric behaviors, and complex social dynamics, eventually turning my mundane suburban routine into a bizarre and comical battle for the books. At first, I'd only glance inside as I passed by, but I gradually realized something was amiss. This little library wasn't just a place for haphazard book dumping. The contents were always impeccably organized, fiction and nonfiction stacked on separate sides, with children's picture books neatly arranged in the lower compartment. Spines faced outward, and the books were aligned with a precision that put actual bookstore shelves to shame. I initially assumed a helpful neighbor was tidying up in passing, until one Saturday morning while out for a run, I bumped into Mrs. Barbara, a retired elementary school teacher in her 70s with her hair combed to perfection. She was wearing white gloves and crouching beside the box, wiping book covers with a microfiber cloth while muttering things like, "This one is in the wrong category," or "We can't have dog-eared pages." Seeing me pass by, she straightened up to greet me with a smile and proceeded to explain the library's unwritten rules: no damaged or scribbled-in books, absolutely no pirated copies, and magazines or comics should ideally be kept in a separate corner. It was best to leave a book if you took one, though not strictly required, but you certainly couldn't just haul away a huge stack all at once. I listened in astonishment. It turned out that this unsupervised, free-to-use box had rules even more meticulous than those of a public library. Over the next 2 weeks, I gradually witnessed the lively activity surrounding this little library. People came and went, dropping off and picking up books, all tacitly adhering to the rules Mrs. Barbara had established. The box remained perpetually clean and tidy until Mark, a programmer who had recently moved into the house at the end of the street, disrupted the peace. Mark was a bearded homebody. On his 3rd day in the neighborhood, he stuffed a heap of items into the little library, not books, but a complete set of old board game cards, a half box of unopened pencils, 3 DVDs of movies from over a decade ago, and even a palm-sized plush dinosaur toy. He had attached a note: "These are just things I'm not using. Take them if you find them useful. It doesn't have to be books, you know." This stirred up a hornet's nest. The very next morning, Mrs. Barbara cleared out all these non-book items and arranged them neatly on the nearby bench with a note of her own: "This little library is for books only. Please dispose of other items yourself." I thought that would be the end of it, but Mark turned out to be stubborn. That very afternoon, he put the items back in the box, accompanied by an even longer note: "The official rules don't say only books are allowed. It's about sharing in used items. They don't necessarily have to be made of paper." A back-and-forth battle ensued. Mrs. Barbara would clear the items out in the morning, and Mark would stuff them back in at night. She would move the board games to the bench, and he would tuck the DVDs deep inside the stack of books. Eventually, Mrs. Barbara began making scheduled patrols every day, while Mark set an alarm to come out and restock in the middle of the night. The two never actually met face to face, communicating entirely through notes, over a dozen of them exchanged back and forth. The writing crackled with tension, yet remained scrupulously polite. Not a single harsh word was ever exchanged. Word of this spread quickly through the neighborhood, dividing residents into two camps. Longtime residents mostly sided with Barbara, arguing that the little library was meant for books and the rules shouldn't be broken. Younger residents sided with Mark, feeling there was no need to be so rigid. Anything shareable was fair game, and a bit of liveliness was a good thing. Gradually, the contents of the little library became increasingly eclectic and bizarre. Neighbors on Mark's side would secretly slip in all sorts of spare items: handmade scented candles, used gardening tools, cans of cat food their pets wouldn't eat, and the most outrageous find was a half jar of homemade strawberry jam labeled safe and non-toxic. Freshly made, delicious with bread. Meanwhile, neighbors on Barbara's side would come by daily to tidy up, sorting out non-book items and placing them to the side, while adding more beautifully bound, authentic books in an attempt to purify the library. That tiny, 1 cubic meter wooden box had effectively turned into a battlefield for the two factions. Every time I walked past, I'd spot new changes. It was more addictive than binge-watching a TV series. Caught in the middle, I found the whole situation both amusing and baffling. A trivial matter had somehow managed to get the entire neighborhood deeply invested. Then, one night, I returned from working late and stumbled upon an unexpected scene. Mrs. Barbara was standing by the little library, holding that jar of strawberry jam and reading the label by the light of a street lamp, while Mark stood beside her, carrying a plastic bag, and the two of them were actually talking. Just as I was about to take a detour to avoid an awkward encounter, I heard Mrs. Barbara sigh and say, "It's not that I'm stubbornly clinging to rigid rules. You see, my late husband built this little library himself. He loved reading. After he retired, he spent every day tending to this box, wanting the neighbors to have access to good books for free. After he passed away, I just wanted to preserve his legacy and keep things exactly as he left them." Mark scratched his head and smiled sheepishly. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't know the story behind it. I just moved here alone and felt a bit lonely. The box looked interesting, and I wanted to join in the fun. I never meant to cause any trouble." Standing behind a tree, I felt a sudden warmth in my heart. It turned out that those seemingly rigid, fussy rules were actually rooted in unspoken longing, while those eccentric antics were simply a young person's clumsy attempt to connect with others. When I passed by the little library the next morning, everything had changed. The sky blue box remained, and the books inside were still neatly arranged, but a new two-tiered wooden stand, clearly freshly made, sat beside it. It held board games, DVDs, cans of cat food, and even that jar of strawberry jam. A handwritten note was taped to the top: "Sharing corner, books inside, spare items outside. Help yourself, just enjoy." It was signed by Barbara and Mark. From then on, our community's little library truly broke the mold and became the liveliest spot in the neighborhood. Mrs. Barbara continued to manage the books inside, keeping them spotless and organized, while the sharing corner outside became a hodgepodge of all sorts of things: homegrown tomatoes and zucchini, half-finished knitted scarves and yarn, leftover paint and brushes, and even drawings and spare stationery left by local children. People generally understood that they could keep whatever they took or leave something in return. It was entirely up to them. Someone might take a jar of jam and leave a pack of cookies. Another might pick up a novel and leave a potted succulent. Someone even left a small notebook in the sharing corner where neighbors could jot down daily musings, book recommendations, or requests for help, asking, for instance, "Does anyone have a tire pump I could borrow?" or "Is anyone up for a dog walk on Saturday afternoon?" Through these interactions, neighbors who once merely exchanged nods grew genuinely close. It was my second month living in a rainy suburb of Seattle, Washington, and the endless overcast days were starting to drive me stir-crazy. One drizzly evening, I stumbled upon a fat orange tabby huddled in the corner of my porch, sheltering from the rain. Its fur was matted and wet, and it meowed intently at the takeout bag in my hand. Softening, I dug a can of tuna out of the fridge, emptied it into a paper bowl, and set it down for the cat. Watching it wolf down the food was strangely soothing. I had no idea that this casual act of kindness was actually dragging me into a years-long stray cat feeding war within the neighborhood, or that I was about to witness the absurd yet endearing lengths ordinary Americans would go to over a few cats. The very next morning, when I opened the door to grab the newspaper, I found a neatly typed anonymous note weighed down on the porch steps. It read, "Please do not feed the stray cats. They damage lawns, spread disease, and negatively impact the neighborhood environment. If the feeding continues, we will contact the HOA and animal control." The tone was stern and serious, leaving me completely baffled. After all, it was just feeding a cat. Was such a fuss really necessary? Just as I was wondering about the situation, Mrs. Elliott from next door knocked on my door carrying a plate of freshly baked blueberry muffins. A retired nurse with graying hair and a gentle manner, she sat down and lowered her voice to fill me in on the neighborhood's cat wars. It turned out there were 3 resident stray cats in our community, the chubby orange tabby I fed, plus a calico and a black cat. The neighborhood was sharply divided into 2 factions over them. One was the anti-cat camp, led by Mr. Clark, an engineer living at the end of the street, who viewed the strays as filthy nuisances that pooped on lawns, dug up plant roots, attracted other wildcats, and dragged down property values. They were constantly plotting to have the cats rounded up and sent to an animal shelter. The other was the pro-feeding camp, led by Mrs. Elliott and consisting mostly of retirees and young animal lovers who felt sorry for the lonely strays and appreciated their mouse-catching abilities. They took turns secretly feeding the cats and had even built a few small, rainproof shelters for them near the edge of the woods. The 2 sides had been battling for nearly 3 years, clashing openly and covertly countless times without a clear victor. By feeding the cat in public yesterday, I had effectively declared my allegiance, which naturally earned me a warning from the anti-cat faction. I listened in stunned disbelief. I never imagined a few stray cats could spark such a prolonged feud among neighbors. But the truly bizarre part was yet to come. Over the next 2 weeks, I witnessed firsthand the outlandish tactics employed by both sides, a drama more thrilling than any spy movie. It started with Mr. Clark, a staunch member of the anti-cat faction, who bought a large bottle of cat repellent spray and coated the entire perimeter of his yard's fence with it. He also set up several ultrasonic repellers on his lawn that emitted high-frequency, inaudible to humans noise designed to scare cats away. The pro-feeding faction countered with their own strategies. Mrs. Elliott and the others began bypassing the Clark residence entirely, moving their feeding station to a cluster of bushes in the middle of the neighborhood. They even purchased a covered, rainproof feeder to keep the food dry, and someone went so far as to secretly spread softwood shavings nearby, reasoning that this would clean the cat's paws and prevent them from tracking mud onto other people's lawns. As the back and forth continued, both sides upgraded their gear. Realizing his repellents were ineffective, Mr. Clark paid out of pocket to install 3 motion-activated sprinklers around his yard, designed to spray any approaching cat, and posted screenshots in the neighborhood group chat, declaring he would make sure the strays wouldn't dare set foot inside. Yet, the very next day, a small parasol and several plush cat beds appeared next to the feeding station, purchased by a few college students from the pro-feeding group. They posted photos of the cozy setup with the caption, "Even on rainy days, the little ones deserve a warm place to stay." While there was no open confrontation, the underlying rivalry was palpable in every word. The funniest incident, however, was a cat food mix-up. One morning, Mrs. Elliot went to feed the cats and discovered that the premium food in the station had been replaced with the cheapest, lowest quality kibble, with an empty bag discarded nearby. Suspecting sabotage by the anti-cat faction, she spent ages arguing, albeit indirectly, in the group chat. It turned out the culprit was a young boy from the neighborhood who had just started elementary school. He had secretly swapped in his own cat's food, thinking the strays were becoming picky eaters from eating too well and wanting them to try a different flavor. The revelation left everyone amused and exasperated, rendering the entire argument pointless. Beyond the open rivalry over supplies, there was plenty of covert maneuvering. The anti-cat faction would secretly dismantle the cat shelters, only for the pro-feeding group to sneak out at night and put them back together. The feeders would slip in extra cans of food when no one was looking, while the opposition monitored security footage, snapping photos the moment they saw someone feeding the cats to submit complaints to the HOA. The ultimate move came from Mr. Clark, who, determined to prove the cats were damaging the environment, spent 3 days staking out the lawn to photograph them defecating. He compiled the images into a dossier and demanded the HOA implement a ban on feeding them. The pro-feeding faction countered even more effectively. They contacted a local animal rescue group to have all 3 cats spayed or neutered and vaccinated, ensuring they received the standard ear tip marks used in TNR, trap, neuter, return, programs. Armed with official documentation, they presented their case to the HOA, arguing that these were officially sterilized working cats that kept the community's rat and squirrel populations in check, benefiting the environment rather than harming it, and actually reducing pest issues. With both sides deadlocked, the HOA was at a loss and dragged its feet for months without reaching a verdict. The turning point came on a rainy, windy night late in the autumn. I was up in the middle of the night when I heard a cat meowing outside. Peeking through the curtains, I saw the fat orange cat huddled on Mr. Clark's porch, soaked to the bone and meowing at the door. Just as I was debating whether to grab a towel and bring it inside, Mr. Clark's door opened. That stern man, who was always clamoring to catch the cats, stepped out holding a dry towel. After hesitating for a long moment, he knelt down to dry the cat off and set a bowl of warm water by the doorway. Though he kept his brow furrowed and maintained a look of deep reluctance, his movements were incredibly gentle. By the next day, the story had spread throughout.
17-year-old Leo Carter gripped the steering wheel of his beat-up 2008 Honda Civic, squinting through the sheets of rain hammering his windshield. It was 11:37 p.m. on a Friday in Portland, Oregon, and he was driving home from his best friend Jake's house, where they'd spent the night playing video games and arguing about college applications. Leo was an average kid. B. Student, decent at cross country, terrible at asking girls out. He spent most of his time scrolling TikTok, skipping his AP Physics homework to play Minecraft, and fighting with his mom about screen time. His dad, a high school math teacher, kept trying to bond with him over weekend home improvement projects, and Leo kept brushing him off. "You'll regret wasting your potential," his mom had said that morning, after finding his half-finished physics lab on the kitchen table. Leo had rolled his eyes and stormed out. Now, driving through the rain, he felt a twinge of guilt. She was right, probably. He was wasting his potential. He'd always loved physics, deep down, loved taking things apart and figuring out how they worked, but he'd never tried hard at school. What was the point? He'd probably end up working at the local auto shop anyway. A deer stepped out onto the road. Leo's eyes went wide. He slammed on the brakes. The tires locked up, hydroplaning on the soaked asphalt. The Civic spun sideways, skidding toward the guardrail. Time slowed down. He thought of his mom's chocolate chip cookies, of his dad laughing when he taught him to ride a bike, of the half-built drone he had on his desk at home. The car hit the guardrail with a deafening crash. Everything went white, then black. Hashtag chapter 2. A very confusing birth. The first thing Leo became aware of was noise, loud, high-pitched, overwhelming noise. Bright lights burned his eyes. He tried to blink, to sit up, to ask what was going on, but all that came out of his mouth was a shrill, wailing cry. Asterisk, what the hell? Asterisk. He tried again. More crying. His body felt tiny, weak, heavy. He couldn't control his arms or legs. They flailed around on their own, tiny fists balling up. Someone wrapped a soft, scratchy blanket around him, lifting him up. He blinked hard, forcing his blurry eyes to focus. A woman with tired, smiling eyes was looking down at him. She had brown hair streaked with a little blonde and a faint smattering of freckles across her nose. Leo's breath caught. That was his mom. Younger, thinner, no gray hairs at her temples, but definitely his mom. "Hi, baby," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. Lil. Welcome to the world." Lao. She named him Leo again. His mind reeled. The crash, the pain, the darkness. And now this? He was a baby, a newborn baby. He'd been reborn, back to the very beginning. It was impossible, crazy, the kind of thing you saw in bad sci-fi movies. But he could feel the soft blanket against his skin, hear his mom's heartbeat when she held him to her chest, smell the faint scent of lavender soap and hospital antiseptic. It was real. He was Leo Carter again, born to Emily and Mark Carter, in Portland, Oregon. Starting over, a man leaned over the hospital bed, grinning from ear to ear. His dad, young, with a full head of brown hair, no lines around his eyes yet. He reached out a tentative finger, and Leo's tiny hand wrapped around it automatically. "Hey, little guy," his dad said, his voice wobbly with emotion. "I'm your dad. We're going to have so much fun together." Leo's throat tightened. In his first life, he'd spent most of his teens being annoyed by his dad, tired of his dad jokes, tired of him asking about school, tired of him trying to hang out. Now, hearing that warm, familiar voice, all he wanted to do was hug him. But he couldn't. He was a newborn. All he could do was cry and sleep and make messes. The next few weeks were equal parts surreal and torturous. Leo had the full memories, knowledge, and cognitive ability of a 17-year-old boy trapped in the useless body of an infant. He couldn't talk. He couldn't walk. He couldn't even hold his own head up. He had to be carried everywhere, fed mushy baby food that tasted like nothing, and, worst of all, have his diaper changed by his parents. It was humiliating. He spent most of his days napping. His tiny body got tired constantly, and observing. He watched his mom sing off-key to him while she folded laundry. He watched his dad sit in the rocking chair at 2 a.m., holding him when he was fussy, whispering about all the things they'd do together when he was older. He watched them stay up late worrying about money, about being good parents, about whether they were doing it right. In his first life, he'd never thought about any of this. He just assumed his parents were always there, always stable, always had it all figured out. Now he saw how hard they tried, how much they loved him, how scared they were of messing up. One night, when he was about 6 weeks old, his mom held him close and cried quietly into his soft baby hair. Her mom, Leo's grandma, had been diagnosed with breast cancer. In his first life, his grandma had died when he was 5. He barely remembered her. Now, hearing his mom grieve, he wished he could say something, could tell her it would be okay, could hug her back, but he couldn't. All he could do was make a soft, cooing sound and grab a fistful of her hair. His mom laughed through her tears, wiping her eyes. "You're my sweet boy, aren't you?" she whispered. "My little Leo." Leo made a decision that night. This second chance wasn't just about him. It wasn't just about getting good grades or being a genius or having a fancy career. It was about them, about being the son his parents deserved, about appreciating every second he had with them, about not wasting this life the way he'd wasted the first one. He had a 17-year head start on life. All the knowledge, all the regrets, all the lessons learned. He was basically a genius by baby standards. Okay, by any standards. He knew high school math, college physics, how the internet worked, how the world would change over the next 17 years. But he couldn't just come out and say it. If a 1-year-old started reciting calculus formulas, his parents would freak out. They'd take him to doctors, to psychologists, to TV shows. He'd be a lab rat, a sideshow. He'd never have a normal life. No, he had to hide it, at least at first. He'd reveal his intelligence slowly, in age-appropriate, if very advanced ways. He'd be a gifted kid, not a supernatural freak show. That way, he could use his smarts to make his parents' lives better, to help people, to do all the things he'd regretted not doing the first time around, without ending up on a research table. It was a solid plan. Now he just had to survive babyhood long enough to execute it. Hashtag chapter 3, the prison of infancy. By the time he was 3 months old, Leo had figured out how to roll over on his own. His parents were thrilled, calling him their little overachiever. Leo just rolled his eyes on the inside and kept practicing. Rolling over was child's play, literally, but it was the first step toward being able to move around on his own. He mastered sitting up at 5 months, crawling at 7 months, and walking at 10 months. His pediatrician said he was developmentally advanced, but nothing unheard of. Lots of babies walk early, she told his relieved parents. Leo held back a smirk. If they only knew. Talking was the hard part. His tiny mouth and vocal cords couldn't form words properly. He babbled like any other baby, but inside his head, he was composing full sentences. His first real word came at 11 months old. His mom was sitting on the floor with him, stacking colorful plastic blocks. "Can you say mama?" she asked, leaning in, grinning. "Mama. Say mama." Leo had heard this 100 times. Usually he just babbled back. But that day, he was tired of waiting. He took a deep breath, focused hard, and said, clear as day, "Mama." His mom froze. Her eyes went wide. "What? Did you just, Leo, say that again?" "Mama," he said again, easier this time. His mom screamed, quietly, so she wouldn't scare him, and grabbed her phone, calling his dad at work. "Mark, he said it. He said, Mama, you need to come home." "No, I'm not kidding. He just—" Leo smiled to himself. It was a tiny thing, one word. But the way his mom's face lit up, it was worth the wait. By the time he was 18 months old, he was speaking in full sentences. Short, simple ones, but full sentences. His parents were amazed. Their friends called him a little genius. The pediatrician said he had exceptional verbal skills for his age. Leo played along, acting like a very smart toddler, not a teenager trapped in a tiny body. The best part of being able to talk was getting to have real conversations with his parents. He could ask his dad about his math lessons at school. He could tell his mom he liked her drawings. She was a freelance graphic designer, working from home. He could say, "I love you," and actually mean it, with full understanding of what those words meant. The worst part? Baby food. Now that he could talk, he could complain about it. "Mom," he said one night, pushing a bowl of pureed peas away, "I want pasta, like you and Dad eat." His mom blinked. "Leo, you don't have all your teeth yet. Pasta is for big kids." "I have enough teeth," he insisted. "I can chew it." "Please?" He gave her his best puppy dog eyes, a skill he'd perfected in his first life to get out of trouble. His mom sighed, smiling. "Okay, fine. We'll try a little pasta. But if you choke, it's your fault." He didn't choke, and from that night on, he graduated to real food. It was a small victory, but one of the best he'd had so far. When he was 2 years old, his parents got him a kid's tablet, one of those rugged, rubber-covered ones with educational games. They thought he'd play matching games and learn his ABCs. Leo had other plans. He figured out the parental password on the second day. His mom used her birthday, easy guess. He downloaded a proper web browser. He found free online college courses. Khan Academy, Mit Oken Kursava, physics lectures on YouTube. While his parents thought he was playing silly learning games, he was working his way through college-level calculus and classical mechanics. He did it during nap time, or while his mom was on work calls, or in the evening after his dad read him a bedtime story and left the room. It was easy, scarily easy. With a fully developed adult brain and 17 years of life experience, learning advanced material came faster than it ever had the first time around. Concepts that had confused him as a 17-year-old clicked instantly now. He was learning at a rate no actual child could match. But he was careful. He never left the educational websites open. He always switched back to the toddler games if he heard someone coming. He let his parents think he was just a very smart 2-year-old who knew his letters and numbers. They were proud enough of that. He didn't need to blow their minds by telling them he was already studying thermodynamics. That year for Christmas, his dad got him a big box of Lego, the classic kind, with hundreds of random bricks. Leo's face lit up when he opened it. In his first life, he'd loved Lego as a little kid, but he'd stopped playing with them when he got to middle school, thinking it was kid stuff. Now he was thrilled. He spent the whole week after Christmas building things. Simple stuff at first, in front of his parents, little houses, cars, planes. Then, when he was alone in his room, he built more complex things. A working gear system, a small bridge that could hold weight, a tiny catapult that could shoot a Lego brick across the room. His dad walked in on him once while he was mid-catapult test. Leo froze, waiting for the questions. But his dad just laughed, kneeling down next to him. "Wow, buddy," he said, impressed. "You built that all by yourself? That's really cool. You're going to be an engineer someday, huh?" Leo smiled, relieved. "Maybe," he said. His dad ruffled his hair. "Whatever you want to be, kiddo. I'm proud of you no matter what." Leo's chest felt warm. In his first life, he'd never really believed that. He'd always thought his dad was disappointed in him for being average. Now, hearing those words, knowing how genuine they were, it meant everything. Hashtag chapter 4, skipping straight to second grade. When Leo was 4 years old, his parents started talking about kindergarten. They toured a few local public schools, met with teachers, asked Leo what he thought. Leo thought kindergarten was going to be mind-numbingly boring. Sitting in a circle, singing songs, learning to count to 100, coloring pictures. He'd done all that. He was already past high school level in math and science. Kindergarten would be a year of absolute torture. He needed to skip grades. But how? He couldn't just tell his parents. He already knew everything they taught in elementary school. That would raise too many questions. He had to show them, slowly, that he was way ahead. He started reading early. Always known how to read, of course, but he pretended to be learning like any other kid. At 4, he graduated from simple picture books to chapter books, real chapter books, the kind for 8 and 9-year-olds. His mom caught him reading Charlotte's Web on his bed one afternoon. She stood in the doorway for a minute, shocked. "Lau," she said, "careful. Honey, can you read that to me?" Leo looked up, pretending to be innocent. He read a page out loud, perfectly, with expression. His mom sat down on the bed, stunned. "Who taught you to do that?" "I just figured it out," he said, which was technically true. The words make sense. That was the first crack. After that, his parents started testing him gently. They gave him math problems. He did multiplication and division like it was nothing. They asked him science questions. He explained how rainbows formed, why the sky was blue, how plants made food from sunlight. His parents were equal parts thrilled and bewildered. They took him to the pediatrician, who referred them to a child psychologist who specialized in gifted children. The psychologist ran a bunch of tests, IQ tests, achievement tests, cognitive assessments. When the results came back, the psychologist sat down with Leo's parents, looking very serious. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," she said, "Leo is exceptional. His IQ is well above 150. His academic achievement is at roughly a 5th grade level. In math and science, he's even higher. He's one of the most profoundly gifted children I've ever tested at this age." His mom's hand flew to her mouth. His dad sat forward, eyes wide. "5th grade," he repeated. "But he's 4. The psychologist nodded. "It's extremely rare, but not unheard of. He's what we call a profoundly gifted child. A traditional kindergarten classroom would not be appropriate for him. He'd be bored out of his mind, which can lead to behavioral problems down the line." She recommended grade skipping, a lot of grade skipping. She said Leo would be best suited starting school directly in 2nd grade, with additional pull-out sessions for advanced math and science. His parents were overwhelmed, scared almost. They worried he'd be too young, that he wouldn't make friends, that he'd be bullied for being the smallest kid in class. They worried they'd push him too hard, that he'd miss out on being a kid. That night, Leo found them sitting at the kitchen table, talking quietly. "I don't want him to grow up too fast," his mom said, her voice wobbly. "He's only 4. He should be playing with blocks and chasing butterflies, not doing 5th grade math." "I know," his dad said, "but what if we hold him back and he's miserable? What if he hates school because it's too easy? We have to do what's best for him, not what makes us most comfortable." Leo stood in the hallway listening. His throat felt tight. They weren't proud of having a genius kid. Not really. They were worried about him, about his happiness, about his childhood. He walked into the kitchen, grabbing his mom's hand. "Mom," he said, looking up at her with his big 4-year-old eyes, "I want to go to 2nd grade. I'll be okay. I'll make friends, and I'll still play with blocks. Promise." His mom looked down at him, tears in her eyes. She pulled him in her lap, hugging him tight. "Oh, baby," she whispered, "you're so little and so smart all at once. It scares me sometimes." "I know," he said, snuggling into her. "But you don't have to be scared. I'm still me. You're Leo." That was the thing no one ever expected about being a child prodigy. The hardest part wasn't the schoolwork. It was making sure your parents didn't forget you were still their kid under all the smarts. Hashtag Chapter 5, the smallest kid in class. 2nd grade was an experience. Leo was 4 years old, turning 5 in October. The other kids were 7 and 8. He was a full head shorter than everyone else. His desk was too big. His chair was too high. The other kids stared at him. "Is that a kindergartner?" he heard one boy whisper. "Why is there a baby in our class?" Another girl asked the teacher. The teacher, Ms. Henderson, was a kind woman with gray hair and round glasses. She'd been warned about Leo, and she handled it well. She stood in front of the class on the first day and said, "Everyone, this is Leo. He's joining our class this year. He's a little younger than all of you, but he's very smart, and he's going to be part of our class family. I want everyone to be nice to him and help him feel welcome. Okay?" The kids nodded, but they still stared. At recess, Leo sat on a bench by himself, watching the other kids play foursquare and tag. He didn't really want to play. 7-year-old games were boring to a 17-year-old mind, but he also didn't want to be the weird loner kid. "Hey!" A quiet voice pulled him out of his thoughts. A boy with messy brown hair and glasses was standing in front of him, holding a Rubik's Cube. He was a little chubby, with a smudge of dirt on his cheek. This was Milo Jenkins. Leo recognized him from his first life. Milo had been the quiet, bullied kid in their grade, the one everyone called nerd and loser, the one who ate lunch alone in the library. Leo had never talked to him back then. He'd never been mean to him, but he'd never been nice either. He just ignored him, like everyone else. Now, Milo was standing in front of him, holding a Rubik's Cube. "Can you solve it?" Milo asked, nodding at the cube in his hand. Leo blinked. "Yeah, can you?" Milo sat down next to him on the bench. He twisted the cube a few times, fumbling. "Not really. I can get one side. That's it. My grandma got it for me for my birthday." He held the cube out to Leo. "Can you show me?" Leo took the cube. He'd been able to solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute since he was 12. His fingers moved quickly, twisting and turning the sides, muscle memory taking over. 20 seconds later, he held out a fully solved cube. Milo's eyes went wide. "Whoa," he said, amazed. "That was so fast. How did you do that?" "I can teach you," Leo offered. "It's easy once you know the algorithms." "Algorithms?" Milo repeated, sounding impressed. "You know big words too?" Leo smiled. This was okay. Milo was nice, and he was into the same stuff Leo was: puzzles, games, how things worked. He wasn't like the other 7-year-olds running around screaming about superheroes. Well, he was 7, but he was a nerd 7-year-old. Leo could handle that. They sat on the bench for the rest of recess, Leo teaching Milo the first few steps of solving the cube. Milo was a quick learner. He paid attention, asked good questions. By the end of recess, he could solve the first layer all by himself. "Thanks," Milo said, grinning as the bell rang. "You're way cooler than the other kids. Want to sit with me at lunch tomorrow?" "Sure," Leo said. Just like that, he had his first friend in his second life. And this time, he wasn't going to be the kid who stood by and let his friend get bullied. The bullying started a few weeks later. There was a group of 3 boys, Tyler, Jake, and Ryan, who were the biggest, most popular kids in class. They liked to pick on kids who were smaller or weirder than them. Milo was an easy target, and Leo, the tiny 4-year-old genius, was even easier. It started with small stuff: tripping Milo in the hallway, calling Leo baby genius in a mean voice, hiding Milo's crayons, knocking Leo's books off his desk. Ms. Henderson tried to stop it, but she couldn't be everywhere at once. One day at recess, it got worse. Tyler and his friends cornered Milo by the slide. They grabbed his Rubik's Cube out of his hands, tossing it back and forth between them. "Give it back," Milo said, his voice shaking, trying to grab it. "That's mine." "Ah, is the baby gonna cry?" Tyler taunted, holding the cube over Milo's head. "Nerd baby. Both of your nerd babies." Leo walked up to them. He was tiny, way smaller than Tyler. But he didn't care. He'd been a 17-year-old boy. He'd played football in PE. He got in a fight once, back in ninth grade. He wasn't scared of an 8-year-old bully. "Get it back," Leo said, his voice calm and steady. Tyler looked down at him and laughed. "Or what, baby genius? You gonna cry to your mommy?" Leo didn't yell. He didn't fight. He just looked Tyler dead in the eye and said, "I know your dad works at the car dealership on Burnside. I know your mom is a nurse at Providence Hospital. I know you live on 52nd Avenue, in the blue house with the broken fence. I know you got AC on your last math test, and you lied to your parents about it. I know a lot of things, Tyler. Give the cue back. Now." Tyler stared at him, his mouth hanging open. The other two boys looked at each other, nervous. How did this tiny 4-year-old know all that stuff? The truth was, Leo didn't know all of it. He'd remembered Tyler from his first life, vaguely knew where he lived, what his parents did. The C on the math test was a lucky guess. But Tyler didn't know that. He looked scared, like Leo was some kind of wizard. He held out the Rubik's Cube, dropping it into Leo's hand. "Fine," he mumbled. "Stupid cube anyway." He and his friends turned and ran off. Milo stared at Leo, awestruck. "Dude," he said, "that was awesome. How did you know all that stuff?" Leo shrugged, handing him back the cube. "Lucky guesses." Milo laughed. "You're the coolest kid I know." From that day on, no one bothered them. The story of how Leo, the baby genius, had scared Tyler, the bully, spread around the second grade like wildfire. Kids thought Leo was weird, but they also thought he was kind of scary. No one wanted to mess with him. And Milo? Milo stuck by Leo's side like glue. They became best friends. They ate lunch together every day. They played together at recess. They had sleepovers on weekends, building Lego and playing video games and talking about science. For the first time since he'd been reborn, Leo felt like he was actually living a kid's life, not just pretending to. It was nice. Hashtag Chapter 6, The Garage Lab. By the time Leo was 8 years old, he was in 8th grade. He'd skipped 2nd, 4th, and 6th grades. He was still the smallest kid in class, but no one messed with him anymore. His reputation as the scary smart genius kid had followed him up through the grades. Milo was still his best friend. Milo hadn't skipped any grades. He was smart, but not prodigy smart. So he was still in 4th grade when Leo was in 8th. But they still hung out every weekend, still built things together, still talked for hours about video games and science and space. Leo's parents had converted half of their garage into a lab for him. It had a big workbench, shelves full of tools and electronic parts, a soldering station, and a couple of old computers he'd rebuilt from scrap. His dad had built the workbench himself, and his mom had painted the walls a bright blue and put up white bars for Leo to write equations on. It was Leo's favorite place in the world. He spent most of his free time out there building things. Simple robots, solar-powered toys, a homemade 3D printer he'd built from parts he'd bought cheap online. He entered local science fairs, winning first place every time. The local paper had even written a little article about him. Portland Prodigy 8 wins state science fair. His parents were incredibly proud, but they also made sure he had a normal kid life, too. They made him play outside. They signed him up for a youth soccer league. He was terrible at it, but he had fun. They took him on family trips to the coast, to the mountains, to museums. They never pushed him to study more, to achieve more, to be the best. They just wanted him to be happy. Leo loved them for it. One weekend, when Leo was 9 and in 10th grade, he was out in the garage working on a new project, a low-cost, portable water purification system. He'd been reading about the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, and about all the small towns in rural Oregon with contaminated well water. He wanted to build something cheap, easy to use, that could clean dirty water and make it safe to drink. Something that regular people could afford. Milo was there, sitting on a stool, handing him parts. "Why are you building this again?" Milo asked, watching Leo solder a circuit board. "We could be playing the new Zelda game." "Because it matters," Leo said, focused on his work. "There are people who don't have clean water. That's crazy. We live in one of the richest countries in the world, and people still get sick from drinking tap water. If I can make something cheap that fixes that, why wouldn't I?" Milo was quiet for a minute. "That's really cool, Leo," he said, sincere. "Like superhero cool." Leo laughed, looking up. "I'm not a superhero. I'm just a kid who knows how to solder." "Nah," Milo said, shaking his head. "You're going to change the world someday. I know it. And I'm going to be right there with you, handing you screwdrivers." Leo smiled, feeling warm. "Deal." He finished the first prototype a week later. It was a small, boxy thing about the size of a backpack. It used a combination of activated carbon filters, UV light, and a small solar-powered pump to clean water. It could purify about 5 gallons of water an hour, and it cost less than $75 to build, way cheaper than any commercial system on the market. He tested in the backyard, pouring dirty, muddy water from the garden into one end. Clear, clean water came out the other end. He tested it with bacteria strips. 0 bacteria. Perfect. His dad came out to watch, leaning against the garage door, impressed. "You built that all by yourself?" he asked. "Mostly," Leo said. Milo helped with the casing. His dad whistled. "That's incredible, kiddo. You gonna enter it in the National Science Fair?" The International Science and Engineering Fair, ICF. It was the biggest high school science fair in the country. The winners got college scholarships, internship offers, national media attention. Leo had been thinking about it. "Yeah," Leo said. "I think I am." Hashtag Chapter 7. The fair that changed everything. ICF was held in Phoenix, Arizona that year. Leo was 9 years old, in 10th grade, competing against kids 16, 17, 18 years old. He was the youngest kid in the entire competition. People stared, whispered, took pictures. A few reporters came over to interview the 9-year-old genius kid. Leo handled it all with a calm, mature poise that surprised everyone. He was used to being the youngest, the smallest, the smartest in the room. It didn't bother him anymore. His parents came with him, of course. They were nervous, excited, incredibly proud. His dad carried his project box for him. His mom fixed his hair before his judging interview. "Are you ready, honey?" his mom asked, straightening his collared shirt. Leo nodded. "Yeah, I'm ready." The judging interview went perfectly. He explained his water purification system clearly, answered all their technical questions easily, talked about the real-world applications, about how he wanted to make the design open source so anyone could build it for cheap. The judges were blown away, not just by the project, but by him, by how thoughtful, how humble, how focused on helping people he was. Most kids his age, or any age, really, We're just trying to win." Leo was trying to solve a problem. When the awards ceremony came, Leo sat in the big auditorium between his parents, holding Milo's hand. Milo had flown down with his mom to support him. The announcer called out the winners, starting with third place, then second. Leo didn't win third. He didn't win second. And the first place winner in the environmental engineering category, the announcer said, is Leo Carter from Portland, Oregon, for his project, low-cost solar-powered portable water purification for underserved communities. The auditorium erupted in applause. Leo's mom gasped, clapping her hands over her mouth. His dad whooped, loud and proud. Milo squeezed his hands so tight it hurt. Leo stood up a little stunned. He walked up to the stage, accepted his medal and his trophy from the announcer, and stood there with the other first-place winners, blinking in the bright lights. He'd done it. He'd actually won. After the ceremony, he was swarmed by reporters, by college recruiters, by company representatives offering him internships and job offers. A representative from MIT told him he had a guaranteed spot there whenever he was ready to apply. A clean water nonprofit asked if they could partner with him to manufacture and distribute his purifiers. It was overwhelming, in a good way. That night, his parents took him and Milo out for pizza to celebrate. His dad kept staring at him, grinning like an idiot. "I can't believe my 9-year-old son is a national science fair champion," he said, shaking his head. "When you were a baby, I thought maybe you'd be good at math. I never thought this." Leo smiled, picking at his pepperoni pizza. "It's just a science fair, Dad." Just as his dad laughed. "Leo, this is huge. This is going to change your life." Leo looked across the table at Milo, who was shoveling pizza into his mouth, excited. He looked at his mom, who was wiping happy tears from her eyes. He looked at his dad, who was beaming with pride. Yeah, he thought, asterisk, it is huge, but not for the reason you think. Asterisk, winning the science fair was cool. The scholarship money was nice. The job offers were exciting. But the best part? The best part was getting to share it with the people he loved. The best part was seeing how proud his parents were. The best part was having his best friend there to celebrate with him. In his first life, he'd never had moments like this. He'd never made his parents that proud. He'd never had a best friend who believed in him that much. He'd wasted so much time being angry, being lazy, being scared to try. This time, he was going to try. He was going to use his smarts, his second chance, to do good, to help people, to make the world a little better. And he was going to do it with his family and his friends right there beside him. Hashtag Chapter 8, the hardest choice. The year after Leo won ISCF, everything changed. He was 10 years old in 11th grade. His face was in magazines, on TV news segments, on science websites. Everyone was talking about the 10-year-old genius from Portland. He got hundreds of emails a day from reporters, from colleges, from companies, from kids asking for science fair advice. It was a lot. The biggest offer came from a prestigious boarding school for gifted kids in Massachusetts, the Phillips Academy, Andover. It was one of the best high schools in the country. They'd offered Leo a full-ride scholarship, all expenses paid, to start there the next fall. They had world-class science labs, Ivy League-level classes, teachers who were experts in their fields. It was every genius kid's dream. His parents sat him down at the kitchen table to talk about it. "It's an amazing opportunity, Leo," his dad said, careful. "And we'd be so proud of you if you went. But it's your choice. And whatever you choose, we'll support you. 100%. His mom nodded, her eyes a little sad. We know it's the best school for you, but we miss you like crazy. You're our baby, 10 years old, living across the country by yourself. It's so young. Leo sat there, quiet, looking at the acceptance letter on the table. In his first life, he would have jumped at the chance. He would have left home immediately, ready to be the best, to achieve great things, to prove how smart he was. He would have thought his parents were holding him back. But this wasn't his first life. He thought about coming home from school every day and telling his mom about his day while she made cookies. He thought about working on projects in the garage with his dad on weekends. He thought about Milo, about their sleepovers, about building things together, about laughing at stupid jokes until their sides hurt. He thought about Sunday morning pancakes, about family movie nights, about his dad's terrible dad jokes, about his mom singing off-key in the car. He thought about all the things he'd missed the first time around. All the ordinary, perfect, irreplaceable moments of being a kid with a family that loved him. He could go to Andover. He could get a world-class education. He could graduate early, go to MIT, start a company, be rich and famous and successful. But if he left now at 10 years old, he'd miss so much. He'd miss his little sister's first steps. Wait, his mom was pregnant. He'd almost forgotten. In a few months, he was going to have a little sister. He didn't want to miss that. He didn't want to miss any of it. Success could wait. College could wait. His career could wait. But his family, his childhood, those couldn't wait. They were happening right now, and he wasn't going to miss them a second time. He looked up at his parents. "I'm not going," he said. His parents blinked, surprised. "What?" his dad said. "Leo, are you sure?" "I'm sure," Leo said, firm. "Andover is great, but I don't want to leave home. I don't want to leave you guys and Milo and our garage lab and everything here. I'm 10. I want to be a kid. I want to live at home with my family. I want to be there when my sister is born." His mom's eyes filled with tears. She reached across the table, taking his hand. "Oh, baby," she whispered. "Are you sure? You don't have to stay for us. We want you to follow your dreams." "This is my dream," Leo said, smiling. "My dream isn't a fancy school in Massachusetts. My dream is right here, with you guys, and I can still do all the science stuff from here. I can take college classes online. I can keep working on the water purifiers. I don't have to leave home to be successful." His dad sat back in his chair, looking at Leo with so much love and pride it made Leo's chest feel tight. "You're the wisest 10-year-old who ever lived. You know that," he said, laughing a little. Leo grinned. "I've had a lot of practice." They called the admissions office at Andover that night. Leo politely declined their offer, thanked them for the opportunity, and told them he decided to stay in Portland with his family. The admissions officer was shocked, but she wished him well. When word got out that Leo Carter had turned down a full ride to Andover, people lost their minds. The news wrote articles about it. "Genius kid turns down prestigious boarding school. Here's why." People online argued about it. Some said he was making a huge mistake, throwing his life away. Others said he was smart for valuing his family over his career. Leo didn't care what any of them thought. He knew he'd made the right choice. Hashtag Chapter 9. Home is where the heart is. 5 years later, Leo was 15 years old. He graduated from high school 2 years earlier, at 13, as valedictorian. He'd taken college classes online for a while, then enrolled at Portland State University part-time, studying environmental engineering. He still lived at home with his parents and his little sister, Lila, 4 years old, loud, messy, and completely obsessed with her genius big brother. Milo was still his best friend. They'd started a small nonprofit together when Leo was 12, Clear Water for All. They designed and built Leo's low-cost water purifiers and donated them to rural communities and low-income neighborhoods that didn't have access to clean drinking water. They'd started small, just the two of them working out of the garage. Now, 5 years later, they had a small office space, a handful of employees, and had distributed over 10,000 purifiers across the U.S. and in several countries overseas. Leo was the brains behind the technology. Milo was the people person. He ran the operations, talked to donors, organized volunteer events. They made a perfect team. His dad still taught high school math. His mom still did graphic design. They were proud of him, of course, but they never treated him like he was some kind of celebrity. To them, he was still just Leo, their son, the kid who left his socks on the floor, who ate too many chocolate chip cookies, who teased his little sister until she screamed. And that's exactly how Leo liked it. One Saturday afternoon in October, Leo was out in the garage working on a new, improved version of the water purifier. His dad was out there with him, sanding a piece of wood for the new casing. Lila was sitting on the floor, building a tower out of Lego, babbling to herself. Milo was on his way over to help test the new prototype. The sun was shining through the garage windows. The radio was playing old 2000s rock. The air smelled like sawdust and his mom's apple pie, baking in the kitchen. Leo soldered a wire into place, smiling to himself. He thought back to that rainy night, 17 years ago now, in his head anyway. The car crash, the darkness, the moment he'd woken up as a newborn baby, confused and scared. He'd thought then that his second chance was about being smart, about achieving great things, about being successful, about making up for all the wasted potential of his first life. But he'd been wrong. The second chance wasn't about the smarts. It wasn't about the science fairs or the nonprofit or the college degrees. It was about this, about standing in a garage with his dad, building something together, about his little sister sitting on the floor, making a mess with Lego, about his best friend on his way over to hang out, about apple pie baking in the oven, about ordinary, perfect, happy family life. It was about getting to be a kid, about getting to have the family he'd taken for granted the first time, about getting to love them and be loved by them fully and completely. "Hey, Dad," Leo said, looking up from his workbench. His dad looked over, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Yeah, kiddo." "Thanks," Leo said, simple and sincere. "For everything." His dad smiled, warm and familiar. The same smile he'd had when Leo was a baby, when he'd held him for the first time. "Anytime, Leo," he said. "That's what dads are for." The garage door opened. Milo walked in, holding a box of donuts. "Yo, dudes," he said, grinning. "I brought snacks. You guys ready to test this thing?" Lila jumped up, running over to Milo. "Milo! Milo! Look at my tower." "Whoa, that's awesome, Lila," Milo said, kneeling down to look at her Lego tower. "Taller than last week. You gonna be an engineer like your brother?" Lila nodded vigorously. "Yeah, I'm gonna build rocket ships." Leo laughed, shaking his head. He wiped his hands on his jeans, walking over to join them. Outside, the sun was shining. The trees were starting to turn red and gold for fall. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking. Inside the garage, his family and his best friend were laughing, talking, eating donuts, building things. Everything was perfect, exactly where it was supposed to be. Leo had gotten his second chance, and he'd made the most of it. not because he was a genius, but because he'd learned the hard way that the most important things in life aren't achievements or awards or success. They're the people you love, the home you come back to, the ordinary, quiet, perfect moments that make up a life well lived. And he was going to spend the rest of his life cherishing every single one of them.
It was my second month living in a rainy suburb of Seattle, Washington, and the endless overcast days were starting to drive me stir-crazy. One drizzly evening, I stumbled upon a fat orange tabby huddled in the corner of my porch, sheltering from the rain. Its fur was matted and wet, and it meowed intently at the takeout bag in my hand. Softening, I dug a can of tuna out of the fridge, emptied it into a paper bowl, and set it down for the cat. Watching it wolf down the food was strangely soothing. I had no idea that this casual act of kindness was actually dragging me into a years-long stray cat feeding war within the neighborhood, or that I was about to witness the absurd yet endearing lengths ordinary Americans would go to over a few cats. The very next morning, when I opened the door to grab the newspaper, I found a neatly typed anonymous note weighed down on the porch steps. It read, "Please do not feed the stray cats. They damage lawns, spread disease, and negatively impact the neighborhood environment. If the feeding continues, we will contact the HOA and animal control." The tone was stern and serious, leaving me completely baffled. After all, it was just feeding a cat. Was such a fuss really necessary? Just as I was wondering about the situation, Mrs. Elliot from next door knocked on my door carrying a plate of freshly baked blueberry muffins. A retired nurse with graying hair and a gentle manner, she sat down and lowered her voice to fill me in on the neighborhood's cat wars. It turned out there were 3 resident stray cats in our community: the chubby orange tabby I fed, plus a calico and a black cat. The neighborhood was sharply divided into 2 factions over them. One was the anti-cat camp, led by Mr. Clark, an engineer living at the end of the street, who viewed the strays as filthy nuisances that pooped on lawns, dug up plant roots, attracted other wildcats, and dragged down property values. They were constantly plotting to have the cats rounded up and sent to an animal shelter. The other was the pro-feeding camp, led by Mrs. Elliot and consisting mostly of retirees and young animal lovers who felt sorry for the lonely strays and appreciated their mouse-catching abilities. They took turns secretly feeding the cats and had even built a few small, rainproof shelters for them near the edge of the woods. The 2 sides had been battling for nearly 3 years, clashing openly and covertly countless times without a clear victor. By feeding the cat in public yesterday, I had effectively declared my allegiance, which naturally earned me a warning from the anti-cat faction. I listened in stunned disbelief. I never imagined a few stray cats could spark such a prolonged feud among neighbors. But the truly bizarre part was yet to come. Over the next 2 weeks, I witnessed firsthand the outlandish tactics employed by both sides, a drama more thrilling than any spy movie. It started with Mr. Clark, a staunch member of the anti-cat faction, who bought a large bottle of cat repellent spray and coated the entire perimeter of his yard's fence with it. He also set up several ultrasonic repellers on his lawn that emitted high-frequency, inaudible to humans noise designed to scare cats away. The pro-feeding faction countered with their own strategies. Mrs. Elliot and the others began bypassing the Clark residence entirely, moving their feeding station to a cluster of bushes in the middle of the neighborhood. They even purchased a covered, rainproof feeder to keep the food dry, and someone went so far as to secretly spread softwood shavings nearby, reasoning that this would clean the cat's paws and prevent them from tracking mud onto other people's lawns. As the back and forth continued, both sides upgraded their gear. Realizing his repellents were ineffective, Mr. Clark paid out of pocket to install 3 motion-activated sprinklers around his yard, designed to spray any approaching cat, and posted screenshots in the neighborhood group chat, declaring he would make sure the strays wouldn't dare set foot inside. Yet, the very next day, a small parasol and several plush cat beds appeared next to the feeding station, purchased by a few college students from the pro-feeding group. They posted photos of the cozy setup with the caption, "Even on rainy days, the little ones deserve a warm place to stay." While there was no open confrontation, the underlying rivalry was palpable in every word. The funniest incident, however, was a cat food mix-up. One morning, Mrs. Elliot went to feed the cats and discovered that the premium food in the station had been replaced with the cheapest, lowest quality kibble, with an empty bag discarded nearby. Suspecting sabotage by the anti-cat faction, she spent ages arguing, albeit indirectly, in the group chat. It turned out the culprit was a young boy from the neighborhood who had just started elementary school. He had secretly swapped in his own cat's food, thinking the strays were becoming picky eaters from eating too well and wanting them to try a different flavor. The revelation left everyone amused and exasperated, rendering the entire argument pointless. Beyond the open rivalry over supplies, there was plenty of covert maneuvering. The anti-cat faction would secretly dismantle the cat shelters, only for the pro-feeding group to sneak out at night and put them back together. The feeders would slip in extra cans of food when no one was looking, while the opposition monitored security footage, snapping photos the moment they saw someone feeding the cats to submit complaints to the HOA. The ultimate move came from Mr. Clark, who, determined to prove the cats were damaging the environment, spent 3 days staking out the lawn to photograph them defecating. He compiled the images into a dossier and demanded the HOA implement a ban on feeding them. The pro-feeding faction countered even more effectively. They contacted a local animal rescue group to have all 3 cats spayed or neutered and vaccinated, ensuring they received the standard ear tip marks used in TNR, Trap Neuter Return, programs. Armed with official documentation, they presented their case to the HOA, arguing that these were officially sterilized working cats that kept the community's rat and squirrel populations in check, benefiting the environment rather than harming it, and actually reducing pest issues. With both sides deadlocked, the HOA was at a loss and dragged its feet for months without reaching a verdict. The turning point came on a rainy, windy night late in the autumn. I was up in the middle of the night when I heard a cat meowing outside. Peeking through the curtains, I saw the fat orange cat huddled on Mr. Clark's porch, soaked to the bone and meowing at the door. Just as I was debating whether to grab a towel and bring it inside, Mr. Clark's door opened. That stern man, who was always clamoring to catch the cats, stepped out holding a dry towel. After hesitating for a long moment, he knelt down to dry the cat off and set a bowl of warm water by the doorway, though he kept his brow furrowed and maintained a look of deep reluctance. His movements were incredibly gentle. By the next day, the story had spread throughout